Alright, hello again everybody. Welcome to our next lesson here. This is the growth of unions. This again is for our unit industrialization. So, objectives and standards. You will be able to explain the growth of unions in the United States, and you will be able to analyze how unions worked for the rights of employees. And take a moment there, or a couple of seconds there, to look over the standards if you would please. And our desired result. How did unions work to improve working conditions for people in the United States? Think about some of the things unions and workers are protesting for, and then how are they trying to get those things? Like, what are they trying to do? How are they trying to achieve them? Excuse me. So workers try to organize. Due to low wages and poor working conditions, which you've learned about, workers tried to create large unions, but struggled to do so. Confrontations between workers and management or the government sometimes led to violence and bloodshed. A strike on the railroad. When wages were cut during the Panic of 1873 by the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad for a third time in July 1887, workers in Martinsburg, West Virginia, walked off the job and blocked the tracks. Others soon joined the protest, eventually growing to 80,000 railroad workers. They smashed railroad equipment, tore up railroad tracks, and blocked service for railroads in many major cities. Now, some governors called out their state militias, and gun battles broke out with strikers. A state of insurrection, quote-unquote insurrection, was declared by President Hayes, who you see there, and he sent federal troops to end the strike. 12 days later, more than 100 people were dead, with more than $10 million in damages. Many Americans became fearful of unions as a result of the Great Railroad Strike, and that's a thing we're going to see as we go through here with our lesson about how people are fearful of unions, even though unions are trying to protect the rights of workers. Now, the Knights of Labor. Founded in 1869, the group took a different approach to labor issues. Terence Powderly, who you see there, the leader of the group, used boycotts and arbitration instead of strikes. Arbitration is when you have an outside party come and listen to both sides of the story, basically. What does one side want? What does the other side want? And then they decide what is best or who should get what, okay? Each side maybe might have to give a little bit. You have to give this, they have to give that, to kind of work out the situation. So instead of striking and using violence, this was something the Knights of Labor tried to do. Now, unlike other labor groups as well, the Knights of Labor also welcomed women and African Americans, which was very unique and kind of revolutionary for the time. Members pushed for an 8-hour workday, equal pay for women, no child labor, and worker-owned factories. Now, violence grows. Supporters of the 8-hour workday called a nationwide strike, or that should say called for a nationwide strike, sorry about the typo there, on May 1st, 1886. Now, May 3rd, 1886, Chicago, Illinois police got involved in a fight over a picket line and opened fire, killing 4 strikers. On May 4th, 1886, around 3,000 people gathered in Haymarket Square in Chicago, Illinois to protest the shootings. A bomb was thrown, police opened fire, and workers fired back. It's kind of what you see here in the picture. The bomb going off, police officers here opening fire on the crowd, some of the workers or strikers here. Here's a man yelling. So, in the long run, 10 policemen were killed and about 170 people were injured. 4 were executed of the 8 that were arrested. Critics of unions used the Haymarket Riot, should be a capital there, sorry about that, Haymarket Riot, to claim that unions were dangerous. And again, union membership declined as a result, and there were failed strikes around the country, again, as people were fearful of unions and strikers, thinking they were causing problems around the country. Continued violence grows. Summer 1892, Henry Clay Frick, who you see up here, an anti-unionist, meaning he was against unions, was a manager of a Pennsylvania steel mill that was owned by Andrew Carnegie. You've learned a little bit about Andrew Carnegie already as well. And Frick wanted to cut wages by 20% and locked out union employees from working. Frick then had the Pinkerton Detective Agency bring in replacements. Strikers resisted the replacements and violence broke out, leaving workers and Pinkerton agents killed or injured. Finally, the governor of Pennsylvania called in the state militia to protect the strikers, and the strike ended 4 months later. This is known as the Homestead Strike, Okay, so this is another example of conflict between business and unions during the late 1800s. Another example here, in 1894, the Pullman Palace Car Company, cut wages without lowering rent and prices in the company town. Workers said they would not handle Pullman cars, which caused railroads to almost stop completely. Okay, the railroad managers linked mail cars to Pullman cars, so President Cleveland, Grover Cleveland, who you see here, sent in federal troops to keep the mail running. Okay, that's President Cleveland there. Eventually, a federal court issued an injunction or formal order to stop the boycott, which led to the strike and the union collapsing. Businesses now had a legal tool against unions through the use of injunctions, and this is known as the Pullman strike. So new unions with new results. Even though unions are suffering and struggling to get rights for workers, there's a couple more unions that are going to come about to try to push for this. During the late 1800s, the main union was the American Federation of Labor, or AFL, still around today. Created in 1886, the first leader of the organization was Samuel Gompers, who you see there, who focused on wages, working hours, and working conditions. Now, Gompers would use strikes if necessary, but he preferred negotiations. Collective bargaining, closed shops. Closed shops means that companies can only hire union workers, and an 8-hour workday were some of their goals. Later, the Industrial Workers of the World, IWW, a more radical group, were established. Members were in support of strikes and believed that all workers should form a giant union together. There were a few unions run by women as well, such as the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, or ILGWU, and the Women's Trade Union League, WTUL, as well. So I don't want you to think that women are left out of this completely. They do form their own unions as well to push for better working rights as well. Alright, so our closure. How did unions work to improve working conditions for people in the United States? Think about some of the tactics or strategies they're using. What do they want for people? And then what are some of the struggles, too, that they're facing as well? And I'll help you answer your questions. Hope you have a great rest of your day or night. Please let me know of any questions or concerns. Hope to talk to y'all soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.